That's how we start out right there. Well,
It's
Beneil, we
good.
are in your gym. It makes me feel fat seeing all of the people training here. This is amazing. Are
Yeah,
you kidding me?
this place is a blessing from the Lord.
When did this open?
Well, that's the crazy thing when I say it's a blessing from the Lord. It opened 8 years ago. I was scheduled to fight, and I had an issue with I think it was my spleen to the point where I had to go to the hospital, and my fight got canceled. And I was so frustrated, and I was like, Lord, how can this be? Why did you do this to me? Why? I spent a lot of time. I was a bit younger in the Lord, so I was complained a lot.
Yeah.
And so
Tell them how it ought to be.
yeah, I don't know if much has changed actually now that I think about it. So with all the whys, I started doing the things that I wasn't doing in camp because you put a lot of things off because you're so focused on camp. You want to do all your practice perfectly. So I go to the bank. I got to do some stuff at the bank, and as I'm about to leave, this guy by the name of Lee Malone approaches me and he says, "Hey, Benny, how are you?" And at first I'm like, "Do I know this guy?" And then I realized we had done a seminar in his gym, and I didn't do the seminar, but my friend Nolan did, who's the head coach here, and we started talking, and he told me about his gym. And I say to him, yeah, we thought about actually buying a gym a few years ago. We could never really find the right location, and we just couldn't make it work. I guess it just wasn't in the plans. And then he just looks at me. He's like, man, I've been really considering selling my gym. Would you guys be interested? And that conversation took place in December. In February, we were open.
Wow.
It was all the Lord. It was like instantly everything just came together so well, and Lee's a believer too, so Lee Malone is a believer, so I just couldn't believe it. It wasn't this location, it was a different location, but it didn't take long for everything to just fall into place, and over the 8 years we've been able to expand, and this is the expansion you're looking at.
It's unbelievable. I walked in with a friend of mine, Grant, and he said, this is kind of intimidating. And I got to be honest, I thought the same thing. You're here with a bunch of dudes that are sweaty, look amazing, and look like they're ready to fight. The kind of guy you don't want to meet on a road rage incident. If, you decide to pull over and get out of a car, these guys are going to take you out.
Well, I would hope not. I would hope most of these guys are mature adults and who love the Lord. We have, Bible study here regularly.
Do you really?
Yeah, we have
know
it
that.
every Thursday. We have a once a month service we do. We get together. Men have been baptized in our old place. This November, first Sunday of November, we have 2 people getting baptized. They'll be the first 2 people to get baptized in this gym. So that it's just like when I say this place is a blessing from the Lord, this is the Lord's house. So that's the best way to put it.
Well, I've been thinking a lot about you. This question keeps coming back to my mind. Who wakes up and says, I want to get punched in the face? See, I did not wake up and think to myself, I remember the first time I got punched in the face. I did not like it. I did not like it.
Yeah,
You get punched in the face for a living.
Yeah, I remember my first time somewhat. I was maybe like 3 years old, maybe older, 4. I got hit, and I didn't like it either. And I went to my father and I said, this happened. Do something. Basically, I was trying to get him to comfort me. I was hoping he would do something, but instead he just kind of looked at me. My father wasn't the best in terms of giving advice, but he kind of looked at me. He's like, "Why'd you lose?" That was That was the way he looked at me. He's like, "Why'd you lose?" And I was like, I think I might have said they were bigger. He's like, "Why don't you pick up a stick? Why don't you get a rock?" And I just kind of looked at him. I was like, he's not kidding. But I think he's right. He must be right. He's my dad. He's a genius, right? And so that kind of stuck with me forever. That became a part of me. And so now when fights happened, it was like, I got to win. That's all that matters. I got to win. And so getting hit didn't matter as much. And so it wasn't so much of an issue. And to be honest with you, I think that actually ended up causing a lot of problems in my life because before I became a Christian, I idolized winning. That was my God.
You know, I got to tell you, I think I saw an interview with you one time that reminded me a lot of Bruce Banner in the Hulk. And you basically gave the impression in the interview that when it came time to fight, it was more like you got to let the Hulk out, where you're working so hard to keep him in. Meaning that this guy that naturally desires to fight is now getting released to do that. I'm looking at you and I'm thinking, God kind of wires us for some things. Is that how it is for you?
I would definitely say I am wired a bit different. I know everyone somewhat desires confrontation, but for me, I would say I think at least it's a bit more. And so,
Man,
yeah.
I'm raising 5 kids.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I'm thinking about you in junior high, high school. You know, if you're enjoying some confrontation.
Yeah, I got in trouble a
I was
lot.
going to say, I don't know how long you're staying in some of those places.
Yeah, so I think I desired confrontation more than the average person. But the way my mom was, my grandma was, they were so against it. And so I mean, I ended up getting in fights, but I try to find different places. And finally, when I found jiu-jitsu and MMA, it really allowed me to kind of flourish in terms of the confrontation part, right? I got to do it as much as I wanted to. But to be honest with you, man, fighting is second nature, maybe first nature, actually. I feel more comfortable fighting than doing a lot of other things. Speaking, I know you guys always, have high praises for me, but speaking is so difficult for me in terms of like the nerves and in terms of the stress of it, the anxiousness of it, the anxiety, right? But like if you tell me, okay, hey, we're gonna go to this place, we're gonna grapple, or we're gonna, have sparring matches, or we're gonna do this in this place, okay, that's not really. That feels like, yeah, that makes sense. Let's go do that.
99% of people would choose public speaking, even though that's the worst fear over getting punched in the face and going to the gym to spar.
I would agree. I really do think so too. I think 99% of people would do that instead of getting hit. And unfortunately, I'm not part of that 99 because there's a part of me that wishes I was. One of the things I worry about is like I have daughters, all daughters. My third one will be a girl as well. And the fear of them fighting, like imagine seeing your little girl get hit and seeing her wanting to get hit. It's like, no, I want to keep going. That would just break my heart. To see my little girl get a cut or something. Just the thought of that, it crushes me. Now, if I have a boy, on the other hand, it might be just as worse because he's going to want to do this. Or if he wants to do this, I'm going to be like, well, I guess I got to, I did it, so I can't say he can't do it, right? And the same thing with the girls. And then what's worse is too, what if he doesn't want to do it? And he's like, no, that's not for me. And then everybody around him is like, you don't want to be like your dad? Put that kind of pressure on him. I really do feel I'm in a weird place. I think that's one of the reasons I'd much rather have girls because, put them in tennis.
I've never heard you say that before.
Yeah.
That's the first time I ever heard that from you.
Put my girls in tennis. They can do like the toddlers classes like we have here. They can do all that stuff.
So you don't want them in the ring?
No. I don't know.
I would not want to come upon their dad during the years of dating that you're calling courting.
Yeah, they won't be dating.
Right.
Yeah.
See, that's exactly what I'm talking about.
Any boy that shows up, he shows up better be ready for marriage. And if he is, I'll welcome him.
Okay,
There's no issue there.
Just because, I mean, we got some dads that are, they're off camera right now. How does it go in your mind that a boy discovers he wants to marry your daughter without dying first? That was funny, Beneil, and you didn't laugh. That was funny.
Well, because I'm genuinely thinking about it. Because if someone does do something to my daughters, I don't know if I can control myself. So death is definitely on the table for I guess would be basically
start praying right now, not for your daughters. We start praying for the boys.
For every boy that is interested in my daughter but not for marriage, death is on the table. So I just want that to make that very clear. So, but if a boy shows up and I say, hey, listen, there's only one reason you're here for, and that's for marriage, and he says, okay, we're good. There won't be any issues for me. But
you think you're going to be a good father-in-law? Like things go on in the marriage, you got to work through the fights, you got to work through the problems. You think you're the guy that steps back and says, okay, God, I'm going to let this one unit, leave and cleave,
That-
one flesh.
I think if I can be honest and say, hey, now you're my son and I have to treat you like a son, then yes. But if it's easy to say it. It's a whole nother thing to do it. But, if hurts your girl, says something to your girl, you see something you don't like, that stuff sits with you. And so I think if I can't work through that, it's going to be difficult. But I think if I'm honest with the boys, if I'm honest with them of what I desire and they're in agreement, I think we should be good. And obviously we're not going to see eye to eye on everything, but if they love the Lord, I think we'll be fine.
I got to tell you, Beneil, I think a lot of people are looking for what it looks like to be a man. What does it look like to be in relationship? And when they see a fighter who's willing to go and be the top of his profession, take the shots that are necessary, dish them out as necessary, people naturally say, okay, this is a role model for me. Now, here's my question to you. I've heard you say that maybe the best process of sanctification, meaning being changed into the image of Jesus, is being married.
There's truth to that. Yeah, I do think that.
And you bring your family to the fights.
I do.
I have never in my life heard of that.
Yeah, I do.
Ever.
I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it for the next one, but I hope.
Does it work?
It's worked so far. It's worked great.
Look, I'm not fighting. I'm preaching. But when I go to preach, I want my alone time.
So what's necessary to do it? Normally my father-in-law will come or I'll have some help. And what's great about it is I get to do what I need to do without being disturbed. But I also, when I need that time with my kids, with my wife, to see, hey, what I'm fighting for, they're right there too.
So it's a motivation for you.
It's a great motivation to know, like, hey, I'm fighting for this. It keeps your eyes on the prize, as they would say. And, it's not, I get the going by myself would be easier, but I don't know if easier is always the right answer. I think most of the time it's actually not. So, like I said, I've taken my kids so far. I'm not sure if I'll be able to continue to do that, but I've enjoyed it.
Well, I want to play with this for a second because I think it's important. Most people think of Christians as weak and mild. Mercy, compassion, grace, these are the themes, forgiveness in Christianity. And, I think most that will ever watch this would say, look, I think you're probably a better killer when you don't know Christ.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of that comes, why they get that misconception of Christianity is because they misunderstood the turn the other cheek. To turn the other cheek isn't to just be like, oh, okay, whatever, go ahead. It's okay, I forgive you. It's not that simple. The whole concept of the turning the other cheek was basically saying you will recognize me as an equal, and therefore you're not going to hit me with the back of your hand. You're forced to hit me with the front of your hand, and you're going to recognize me as an equal. And if you hit me as an equal, now there's consequences. You will not get to look just down upon me. And I think that's really important. Jesus wasn't saying just turn around and give up and go away. What he was saying, stand your ground. And in standing your ground, still choose to be holy. And I think that's the difficult thing. It's one thing when people say something about you and you just kind of back off and you're like, whatever, I guess, get away from it. It's a whole nother thing to be like, no, I'm going to stand my ground, but I'm going to love the person in front of me, and I'm going to make sure what I say is not, it doesn't go against what the Lord says.
I heard one time a particular fighter like yourself, he was a believer, was past some of what happened in the ring. He was setting up a tent for revival, and he was getting prepared for preaching. Two guys came up. One guy struck a glancing blow off of his jaw, and he turned the other cheek, and he said, here's the other side. And another glancing blow off of the jaw. And he said, that's all Jesus requires.
I like that. But yeah, I mean, I like that. That I wouldn't do that. You hit me once.
Well, see, this is an interesting topic, Beneil, because I'll tell you, as men living in California, you hear an awful lot about toxic masculinity. you hear an awful lot about how it almost feels like you need to apologize for the fact that you have gonads and you have male DNA.
Yeah.
I don't really hear you saying Christianity requires you to apologize for being male.
No, no, that's silly. I mean, that's absolutely silly. That is made up by a small group of people who obviously hate what godly men stand for, and they're just louder. So it seems like more people believe that, but they don't. Most people don't believe that.
Well, I think along with that, I hear things that come out of you like you want to protect your family. That's a priority to you.
Yeah.
A motivation to you is your family. Most men that I know want to be great protectors, they want to be great providers, and they want to be worthy of respect. They want to have a seat at the table. I often say to people, if you really want to know what makes a man tick, then he wants to be a good provider for his family, he wants to be a protector of his family, and he wants to be one that people look to and say, hey, I want your opinion. I want what you think. I want to be respectable. It feels, I think, to many like that is being removed today, both in Christianity in the church, but also in the culture.
Yes. And I think the way they're doing it, it's really interesting because I would say this is what a lot of the patriarchs felt for. Our culture is so focused on, I wouldn't say like a biblical kingdom or a heavenly kingdom, but kingdom building is the way I would put it, right? They tell us, even to the women, you got to be lawyers, you got to be CEOs, you got to do this, you got to do that. Men, same thing. You got to go out there, you got to earn, you got to work hard, you got to work hard. But they never talk about how you got to be with your family. They never talk about even making a family. They're like, well, that stuff will take care of itself. Actually, no, it's not like that. I would say it's the opposite. If you could be a protector, you could be a provider for your family, if you could do all that stuff correctly, the outside world will fall into place. I think it's the other way around. I think you look at David, he was an amazing kingdom builder, right? But he was a terrible family man. He was a terrible father. He was a terrible husband. The other patriarchs, they fell short too. They had their same exact issues. You look at Jacob, and I know Jacob's just had a terrible start, but he got better as he went. But same thing, he was ruled over by women, and he was so focused on building his wealth, and even when God met him at Bethel, where he was on a rock, right? He slept on a rock. He literally hit rock bottom. God meets him there and says, listen, I'm going to be your God. This is, I'm giving you the covenant. You're going to be the one who the Messiah is going to come from. Like, he's giving him all that. And he says to him, well, if you make me successful, if you give me, land, if you give me money, if you give me whatever, when I come, you'll be my God. So he starts making a deal with God. God's like blessing you, bro. You're at rock bottom, and you're still trying to negotiate. And so that was his mindset, was to go forward and gain wealth. And that's kind of what they're doing to us right now. Everyone, their focus is fame, wealth, and power, but no one's focusing on the things that will keep you from rotting and falling apart, which is keeping your family strong, keeping your marriage strong, keeping your kids healthy. Because even the people who figure it out some degree, they get married, they do a good job with their work, but then they don't give enough time to their children. Eventually, guess what? It only took a generation for that kingdom to fall apart. You could have built whatever you wanted, but if your kids aren't following in your footsteps, if your kids don't believe in what you believe, you just lost your kingdom. And that's what happened to David, right? Awesome. Solomon comes in. One generation, Solomon ends up, worshiping other gods and, marrying 1,000 women.
The reason I think the conversation's unique, Beneil, and the reason I think that what you do is unique is because the perception of a Christian male is passivity.
Yeah.
You need to love your wife as Christ loved the church.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
You need to be meek. The meek inherit the earth. Mm-hmm. The peace of God that surpasses all understanding will come and guard your heart and mind in Christ Jesus. The idea is a lack of accountability, an enjoyment of passivity, And along the way, you're never really free to come into who you're supposed to be. So the world's vision is go and sleep with everybody you can. Go do whatever it is that's going to get you to become somebody of popularity or influence. Make sure that you have what you need. But you seem to be saying that belonging to Christ is actually making you male.
Yeah.
It's the grabbing. It's just, what do you have to say?
So I actually tried it the other way. I tried it by the world standards. You know, I became a Christian in my early 20s. I want to say around 23, 24. I started to get to know who the Lord was around 22, and 24, 25, I genuinely gave my life to the Lord. And I lived by the worldly standards. And I could tell you, it left me empty. You mentioned about how you go around and sleep around. I'll put it this way. I think every single time you sleep with somebody, you give them a piece, and they give you a piece. And if you stay together, that piece is supposed to fill each other, and it makes you whole. But then when you separate, that piece won't fit for you anymore. It won't belong. It's not the right shape anymore. It changes shapes. So now you took a piece and they took a piece, and you got a hole in you and they got a hole in you. And then you move on and you do that again. And none of these pieces ever fall into place. And so because they never fall into place, you could never really make it work. And you don't understand why you can't make it work. And I went through that. Like I would be like, this girl seems nice, but this isn't going to work. I got to go. I got to get away. I got to get away. And that just became a theme in my life until I met the Lord, and until I understood what his desire was for me. I just couldn't, and then he started changing things around. And most importantly, he changed my heart. He made that piece. First of all, the biggest piece that was missing was him. He filled that up, and then I could finally be married, and then I can finally have a wife, and I can finally say, hey, give me that piece, and I'll treasure it, and you can take mine, and you treasure mine. And I couldn't do that with anybody else until I met the Lord.
Beneil, there's going to be people watching, and they're going, this makes absolutely no sense to me at all. You guys are talking about meeting the Lord. You're talking about some change that happens in your life. Can you explain to the best of your ability what it was like to actually have God intervene, to have him start to accost you so that you understood the way you were going was not the way that was ultimately going to be who you were created to become?
So I saw when I would read the Bible is when I saw like what the Lord was saying to me as far as, listen, if you continue on the path you're going, this is where it's going to lead you.
Who taught you to read the Bible?
Calvary Chapel, we go like a couple of verses every
Right,
Sunday.
But I mean, you're 22, 23, 24 years old. You're going to church at 22, 23?
I started because of this. We started having family problems and financially. Iran and America having issues, and we were getting some help from Iran. We have family back there, and we have we have some land and stuff. But once the troubles came in, all of a sudden that's blocked. No longer are we able to bring anything in, and so now all of a sudden we don't have any money. And at 22 years old, my mom calls me and she's like, "Hey, I need help." And at this point, I was supposed to be the next big thing in jiu-jitsu. I had my God. I knew who my God was at that time, and I was so focused on winning. And so she calls me and she tells me we need help. Mind you, just this, that she used to spoil me, never asked me for anything. Whenever I needed something, she would, the only reason I worked was because I didn't like asking her for money so I can compete, because they all thought competing was stupid. It's like, go to college, Yeah. And so she calls me and she starts talking to me about politics and the problems we're having. And I was just like, why is she talking to me about this? Spoiled kid that I am. And she tells me basically what's going on and how she needs help. And she's on the verge of tears. To see my mom on the verge of tears, the one who provides for me, was it was actually very scary. But what overwhelmed me more than that was my desire to stop her from crying, to make her feel better. So I was like, I'll figure it out. Don't worry, Mom, I got this. And she looked at me, obviously, but I go into my room after that, so anxious. I don't know if I've ever been that anxious. And I pray for the first time in my life, because at this point I've been so focused on winning, I've pushed everybody away. I don't have friends that are close. I don't have family that's close because when they would see me, they would be like, "So when are you gonna stop messing around with this jiu-jitsu thing and go to school full time and be serious?" And I that always bothered me so much, right? So I pushed everybody away. So I look up and I say, "All right, if you're real, if you're the real deal, I need something right now."
You praying out loud? You get down on your knees? You just
No,
stand in your room?
I wasn't there yet. I was not. I was more like Jacob. I was
So you just close the door, look up, and start.
I was
talking
like, all
about
right, if you're real, I was like this. If you're real, I've heard about you. If you're real, let's do something. And I start getting calls to fight MMA all of a sudden from my coaches. He's like, let's go to Brazil. There's a fight for you. And at first I was like, I need to start making money. I've fought before MMA. I had done it just for fun because you tell the ladies you fight MMA. It sounds a lot cooler than I do BJJ. That was kind of the idea. And so he calls me and he's like, hey, there's an opportunity in Brazil and they're gonna pay you $5,000 if you win. It was like $2,000 or $3,000 to show up and $5,000 to win. At this point, I fought and I paid to fight. I would pay a couple of $100s to fight. If I had made any money, awesome. And I just was like, what? $5,000? I'm like, when's the fight? He's like, 4 or 5 weeks. I was like, all right, let's do it. So I'm in Brazil. I knee a guy in the head, split his head open, and they stop the fight. I win. I come home. I give my mom the money, and I was like,
feel like a champion.
I feel amazing. Like I'm like so hyped right now. I'm like, Mom, here you go. Here's your money. And she's like, this is amazing. She's so happy. And I was like, all right. I'm like trying to let her know, like I want to go back to jiu-jitsu, to my passion, And she says, this is great, but we have these things called bills. We have loans. And that's how spoiled I was. Like I didn't even think about these things. We have rent and all these things, and so she's like, so I'm kind of asking her, like, how long is this going to last? She's like, well, if we're really good, maybe 2 or 3 months. And so I went back into my room and anxious.
Second time you prayed.
Anxious and freaked out. I said, okay, maybe that was a coincidence. I was like, maybe that was a coincidence.
I like that.
Do it again. And so
same posture. You're closing the door, standing up, looking up to
heaven.
nothing
like
look, 5,000 is good, God, but come on now.
Okay, I was like, okay, I maybe do it again. and
I've never heard this story.
It was it was more of a like I was almost like, was it really you or was that a coincidence? So I ask again, and so this time I get calls as far as coaching, to coach. And a friend of mine calls me, and I had trained his son, and he trains a little bit, but he's like, I want to get into this more seriously. And he's a friend, so I wasn't planning on charging him. So I go in and I train with him a little bit. I show him some stuff, and he loves it. I was like, cool. And I'm about to leave. He grabs onto me and he's like, hey, here's some money. I was like, I don't want that. You're my, like he's an older guy,
my buddy, right.
but you're my friend. I'm not gonna take money from you. But he's from Lebanon and he's very passionate. He starts cursing at me. I was like, all right, I'll take the money. So then I'm about to leave again, and then he grabs me again. And I was like, all right. He's like, so when are we gonna do this again? And I was like, well, I guess whenever you want. He's like, yeah, I want to do this like 3-4 times a week. That alone would pay like my bills, my mom's bills, all our bills. If I just did that with the amount of money he was giving me each time I went to help him. And I was just like, okay.
So the kid that's kind of second class in what he's doing is now moving to the front of the table here because now you're providing.
Yeah. So now all of a sudden, I mean, I literally became the head of the house overnight. I didn't feel like I was the head of the house. I was just trying to run around, figure stuff out. And between that and God continued giving me fights, the Brazil fight might have been my 3rd fight or 4th fight. After 6 fights, the UFC called me. There was a short notice fight available, and they called me, and now I'm in the UFC. My first fight in the UFC, I won within a minute and a half or so, and all these things are happening. There came a point in my life where I was praying, and obviously doors would open. It got to a point where I was like, all right, I actually feel guilty, and that's very common in our culture. The whole honor and guilt thing is very common. So I was like, all right. There's no doubt about it. You're real. What do you want from me?
Right.
First thought that comes to my mind is my wrestling coach, who is a pastor, who has been inviting me to church on Sunday. And so I was like, all right, I'll go to
Wrestling coach in high school?
no, I didn't
Just
really.
wrestling coach.
Yeah, he's just my wrestling coach because MMA, you got to know how to wrestle, right? So he invites me. He's been inviting me to church, and I finally show up. The church is like a mile from my house too. I show up. It's at Calvary Chapel, Yorba Linda, and to be honest with you, church for me was so awkward and not ideal because the worship, I didn't feel comfortable. I felt the Lord, not the Lord, but I felt the enemy just like speaking in my ear, like, you don't belong here, you're a sinner, blah 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 blah.
And you probably went by yourself, right? You went with coach, but
By
you didn't
myself,
take somebody
yeah,
from
no,
your
no,
family.
no.
Right?
I just went by myself. We used to go into an Assyrian church, and I wouldn't even go inside because it was so. It was hard. It's hard to understand, and then you get up, sit
Super
down.
traditional,
Very
right,
traditional.
right.
So I'm going through the worship, and then so I was like, all right, that sucked. Let's see what's next. Then Josh gets up there and he starts speaking, obviously his sermon, and we were going through Corinthians. I want to say it was First Corinthians. So you know how they were just screw ups, and so Paul is really digging into them, but it felt like Josh was digging into me. They kept talking about sin and how sin is, like how sinful they were and how sinful felt like I was, and it just would crush me. I was going Sunday after Sunday, but I was just like, what am I doing here? It felt awful, to be honest with you, but there would always be this guy by the name of Jesus they would talk about. And every time I heard his name, all of a sudden, that weight that was on me would kind of disappear. The heaviness of sin and the fact that it felt like he was directly speaking to me, even though I know he wasn't. I know he was just reading, but it felt like he was directly speaking to me. As soon as he would start talking about Jesus, what he did at the cross, and how he loved us, and all of a sudden the weight of that would come off of me. And so my desire to know him is what led me to start reading the Bible. Once I start reading the Bible, I'm like, I don't even read. I didn't read in high school. I didn't read in college. I was like, what am I doing here? I don't understand anything. You get past, like, you understand. I can understand it to like a superficial degree. Okay, God created the earth. I get that. He made an Adam and Eve, and then all these things come in. Like, I don't know who this snake is. All this stuff. I get it. Okay, maybe he's Satan. He's not. I was so confused. But what kept me going was just I knew that's what God wanted. He wanted me in that church, first of all, and then I knew that I wanted to know who Jesus was. So that just kept me going. And then so I had to learn about these things called commentaries, and these things called study Bibles. And so I imagine this in college, in high school, I cheated my way out of everything. I would refuse to read, and I just didn't have a desire to try. Now I'm trying to figure out who this Jesus guy is, and I'm reading, I'm looking at commentaries, I'm looking at whatever I can find, and I have to like always text Josh, hey, is this guy legit, or should I not listen to this guy? And he'd be like, no, he's fine. No, don't listen to that, kind of deal. And that was a process. It was just searching. Every single time I would hit a question, I would hit a puzzle, I would find something that I didn't understand. Why did God do it this way? Why did God do it that way? I would go to commentaries. And so I started to understand more. And the thing is, my pastor's like, start in Matthew or Mark. Start there. And I was like, no, I'll just start in Genesis. And
true Beneil form.
yeah, it was brutal because it took me 2.5 years.
That way, I'll try this over here.
It literally took me 2.5 years to finish this Bible, and I was just like, even though I finished it, I didn't really understand it to that good of a degree, but I understood who Jesus was. So around 24, I was like, okay, I know who this guy is. I know who Jesus is, and I couldn't keep wrestling with him anymore because my lifestyle of sin, I just couldn't keep doing that. I knew what he wanted. I knew who I was. And I knew in order to change, I had to get down on my knees and be like, take over. Not just my heart, take over every part of me, because I am truly a sinner, and no one, no one's going to tell me otherwise. I know what I am. And if I want to change that, I need you. I need you to direct me in every direction. And so that's kind of how that went. I just eventually when I gave my life to the Lord,
Was it a moment?
It
Did,
was
did did you go in your room and this time you got down on your knees, or you looked back up to
No,
heaven and said,
it was
okay?
like over and it was like I would have moments where like everybody has moments like I had those moments over and over and over and over again. Why? Because I would do it once, but then I'd be like, well, this little sin's
You
fine.
mean you mean where you were kind of praying to
Yeah,
talk
like
to God?
I would pray and be like, okay, I see who you are. That's great. I'm gonna follow you, but I don't want
Okay,
that.
gotcha.
I'd leave some things out. It took 2+ years, I would say, until I genuinely said, okay, your way's not mine. Because, yeah, I mean, right off the bat, I was like, okay, cool. I see you're real. I want to follow you. But then I was like, how about we make a little deal here? Like, I'll do this, but you let me do that kind of. I was negotiating similar to Jacob. I just kept trying to negotiate with him until there came a point where I grabbed onto him and said, bless me like Jacob did.
You remind me of Jacob, actually. This is the story. It's Genesis 32.
It's so funny because I hated Jacob when I first
that
met.
right?
I was like I could not stand Jacob, but it's probably because he reminds me so much of myself. Women ruled over him. I thought I was like I thought I was so cool because I would be with women, but then I would move on whenever I wanted. But in reality, like they ruled over me because I desired them, but not in the way God wanted. So they were ruling over me.
In the Bible, a name means something, especially in the Old Testament, especially with the patriarchs.
Yeah,
So Jacob, his name was deceiver. That's
Yeah.
what his name meant. And he had figured it out.
Yeah.
I mean, he figured out how to get the blessing, how to get his brother out of the birthright, ends up running into Laban, who's a greater deceiver
Yeah,
than he
he-
is, ends up marrying a girl after working for her for 7 years, and because of the whole veil and wedding and marriage thing, ends up marrying a girl, doesn't know who she is till he gets her back in the room, and it's his sister,
Yeah.
not the girl he's after.
And
And then you know the story because you're talking about
Yeah.
it. God accosts him in the middle of the night.
they literally rule over him. These two women. And he's okay with it to some degree. He is. He just like as long as I can keep building my kingdom, they could kind of do whatever they want. And but yeah, Jacob reminds me of myself, and that's probably why I hated him so much in the beginning. When the first time I read the Bible, I was like, how could this guy be? I'd rather have Esau, man. At least.
And the whole time it's also you.
Yeah, it's like he's a hunter, he's strong, he's amazing, blah 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 blah. Because he was like, bro, he sounds like a man's man, right? But he wasn't the guy. He was worldly strong, but he wasn't spiritually strong. And Jacob was the same. He was a trickster, so he would prosper worldly, but spiritually he didn't. And then finally there came a day where he's like, I'm tired of tricking. Bless me. Change my name. I want to be something better. And so he made him Israel.
For the people that don't know the story, they're going to watch this. It really culminates at night. And in the Bible, at night is when you are most tired. Your fears come out to play. You don't have the same strength, don't have the same eyesight, and he's all alone. And for the people that don't know the story, he's essentially trying to save his life from his brother who appears that he may be coming to take him out after what he did to his brother. And then in the Bible, God jumps him. A man jumps him, but it's God jumping him. And God jumps him and allows him to wear himself out wrestling through all of the stuff of his life until the dawn is about to break. And Jacob says, I'm not going to let you go until you bless me. Somewhere in the fight, he realized he wasn't wrestling with some dude. He was wrestling with God.
Yeah. So, you know how I told you I always had questions? Like every time I would read something, there would be a question. Why did God show up to wrestle with him? Like, what was the point of that? And I'm just like, I get stuck in these things. I don't know if I have some kind of ADHD or if I have some kind of like spectrum. I might be. Like, I understand it. When I was younger, I would walk back from school. I just remember this. I wouldn't be able to step on the cracks. I would always try to avoid the cracks. So I looking bad, that could be part of the reason why I was so focused on the Bible. It's just something about it, right? But I asked this question, why did God show up to wrestle with him? And then you go look back. What happened the first time God showed up to him? They made a deal. Guess who honored the deal? The Lord did. Guess who didn't honor the deal? Jacob. He didn't. He said, if you do all these things for me, if you make me wealthy, if you make me a great man, you'll be my God. Well, God did that. On his way back, he was a great man in terms of wealth. So God shows up and says, hey, we had a deal. And Jacob starts wrestling with him. And he says, yeah, but not, I don't want it your way. I want it my way still. And that's where the wrestling starts. And I think God finally breaks him down, similar to how he just broke me down. And Jacob says, okay, I see who you are. And finally, that's his true conversion right there.
And he walks with a limp the rest of his life.
That's correct.
God touches the hip of his socket.
Because those touched by Christ don't walk the same as everybody else.
And they always know where they were broken.
Yeah.
Where they had to cry out on God. I think this is a brilliant illustration of what God has to do to somebody, especially somebody strong, to bring them to a position where they know their need for God. And I think that people watching, some are going to wrestle with this idea of, do I really need this God? You're talking about a religious experience. I've gone to church, I've stood up, I sat down, I've given some money. I'm not trying to have multiple people in my life. But I don't have a clue. I don't have a clue about what you're saying, and I don't even know if I even want to submit to this. What's your thought here?
If I was to make something, I would know what it's made for. I would know what its purpose is. I would know where I would want it to go, whatever this machine is, whatever I'm making, whatever this product is that I'm trying to be. Whether it's for sale or whether it's for my children or whether it's for myself. Whatever I'm making, I know exactly what it's for. I know exactly how it works, and I know its shortcomings and its benefits. I want you to consider this. God made you. He knows exactly who you are. He knows exactly where you came from. You came from him. He knows exactly where you're going. Now, here's the problem. Because he made you in his own image, he gave you free will. I know people are like, that's a problem. Yeah, for us, it's a problem. It's the reason why we got kicked out of the garden, right? We decided to take control ourselves. So because we have free will, we get to now decide. Do we want to let the guy who knows exactly where we're supposed to be, what we're supposed to do, how we were made, and what we were made for, be in charge, or do we want to be in charge? That's the battle right there. That's the question you have to ask yourself. This is for every man and for every woman. You have to decide, the one who created me, is he going to be in charge? The one who knows absolutely everything, is he going to be in charge? Or is it going to be me? I don't know everything, but I'm figuring it out. I'm doing pretty good. I live in, could be Belinda, I live in California, I live in whatever, and I'm living a pretty good life. I'm happy with it. Or some of you might not even be happy with it, but they're just like, okay, it's good enough, that is the question right there. Do you think you have hit your potential? And if you are looking to hit your potential, you are looking to hit what would be considered your best. How can you figure that out without speaking to the one who made you, who knows your purpose, who knows everything about you?
So, Beneil, why would an MMA fighter who, at least on the outside in, has the world at his call and beckon, submit himself to Christ? Why would you submit yourself to another? I mean, you spend an entire lifetime trying to put people in some submitted hold, right? I mean, I'll never forget when I asked you to put me in sleeper hold and your eyes started to dance and you looked happy and excited, and I thought, I may have just ended my life. And I didn't know it was going to move my Adam's apple around, by the way. I'm not sure I actually spoke the way I was supposed to after that.
It definitely hits the worst part.
It hurts.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. You spend all of your training to get into a position in a moment where you can submit somebody and get them to tap.
Yeah.
I don't think a whole lot of people understand why you would be tapping and submitting to God.
The best way to explain it is I tried it my way. I found my God that I liked, and I told you was winning. And I thought to myself, if I could just win, everything else will fall into place. And it was completely the opposite. I destroyed my relationship with my family members to a point where it was just so superficial. I became the black sheep. With my friends, it was even worse because I just stopped communicating with them. And a lot of them, I just stopped communicating because, my desire was to win, and they had different desires, and so I didn't really want to be around them. And all the things that I had considered good at one point were getting further and further from me. And so my way of doing things, where if winning is all that matters and everything else will fall into place, wasn't working. And to the point where I was going to hit rock bottom, even though I was so-called a champion in jiu-jitsu, it wasn't working. So maybe it was time to try something else. And that something else was Jesus. And the difference is, when I put my sights on Jesus, when I followed Jesus, everything else started actually fall into place. That's the difference. When I started following Jesus, my relationship with my friends got better. My relationship with my family got 1,000 times better. I desired to see them. I desired to spend more time with them. Even though they were still kind of giving me a hard time back then, before I got to the UFC, about how, hey, you got to go to school, stop being such a black sheep. I still desired to be around them because I knew that, they were a blessing to me, and I knew what was going on. So I think that's the reason why I submitted, is because when I started to follow Jesus, everything fell into place. When I followed everything that I desired, all my idols, when I followed them, everything fell apart. So he must know something, right? If I'm just following him, and I wasn't even doing a great job at it, but if I'm just following him and all these things are getting better, he must know what he's talking about.
It's almost like he was in pursuit of you too.
Oh, yeah.
You hear your story, there's suffering, things aren't working correctly, and you're having a wrestling match. I call that Genesis 32 Jacob experience, you're wrestling to lose, not to win.
Yeah. It's so funny because Jacob's name was kind of awful. My name means son of God. Ben means son, Il means God, right? Beneil. And so, like, I shouldn't even had that name, until my 20s. But God knew who, like you said, God was always pursuing me. He knew who I was, and he desired me from the beginning, and he anointed me with this name for a reason, because he always knew I was his, and eventually that I would come back to him. And so I was if there's a difference between Jacob and I, is that God had already told me who I was supposed to be, and I didn't listen. And Jacob, his parents had told him he was going to be something else, and he listened to them.
Okay. Jacob ends up having his name changed to Israel, striven with God and overcome, right? He's given a new name. Here's our close.
I like wrestle with God, just
Wrestle
because,
with God.
we're big on wrestling here.
That's great. Wrestle with God, punched in the face by God, I don't know, taken out by God, submitted. Strongest male watching, big guy, wins his life, wins his fights. What do you have to say to him about what he needs that is not going to work if he keeps doing it his way?
Jesus has to store up treasure in heaven where moth and rust can't get it. That's one of those I really struggled with. I was like, what do you mean? How am I supposed to store up treasure in heaven? And there's this idea, well, you could do things for the Lord. You could whether it's your wealth, none of this stuff you get to take home. Like, even the good works you do. We talk about doing good. That's not how Christianity works, right? God has done the good work. You're just being obedient now. You have access to heaven because of what Jesus did, not because of what you did. So I had such a hard time with this, because I even looked at a lot of commentaries, and it never really made sense. And so if you're someone who considers themselves strong, considers themselves a leader, who desires to make a better future, I want you to think of it like this. The greatest thing you could do is store up treasure in heaven. What is this treasure that I could take with me to heaven? The only treasure you can have in heaven is the people you share the gospel with. Because now they know who Jesus is, and now you'll be able to see them in heaven, and you'll be able to spend eternity with them. So if I want treasure in heaven, if I want to have a beautiful future in heaven, if I want to have more of my family and my friends with me, then I need them to know who the Lord is. I need them to know who Jesus is. And you say, well, how does that, being strong, I think a truly strong person is focused on the future. They do want to make a better outcome. There's no better outcome than being able to spend eternity with your loved ones. So I think in order to, if you're a strong man, if you're a strong woman, and you have desires to build great things and do, have great kingdoms and have all these things, there's nothing greater than having all your friends in heaven partying with you.
Well, the great irony to your story is that Jesus won. You lost. Greatest thing that's ever happened to you.
Yes, without a doubt.
At some point, you have to choose to submit yourself to who the Bible says Jesus really is, and that is the one who made you. And he made you for himself.
Yeah.
And you're wrestling with you and ultimately with him until you want to say to him, I am willfully giving you my rights, my will. I want you to forgive me. I want you to carry this. My life is yours. And until you do that, you're a shell.
Yeah.
You're a shadow. And somehow God captured you in that way. Beneil, unbelievable, man. I never want to get punched in the face by you. I want to be really honest about that.
Yeah.
And I thought
I have no desires to punch you, Pastor.
Well,
just to be,
I'm sure
be clear.
I could do something. To
I don't
get
know.
You to
I feel
punch
like
me.
you look at me and you're like, is he going to hit me?
I do think to myself, right now I'm a pretty heavy dude.
Yeah.
I don't even know if you could pick me up and slam me. But I did have these visions of, should we get on a mat and just, and then I thought, what are you thinking, Burgoyne?
I could.
Stay
I could
away
pick you up just
from that
to be
man.
clear.
You don't even have the type of insurance that can fix a nose right now. So don't do that. So, Beneil, thank you.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure,
This
Pastor.
is amazing.